Hello and welcome to Bookly Fun. Today we are going to be reading the final part of The Islander by Cynthia Rylant. Part 4, The Islander. Chapter 11. In the weeks following my grandfather's death, people were very kind to me. The women brought me casseroles and cakes, and the men stopped by to see whether I needed anything. Children were sent to invite me to supper. It is a grace that comes unexpected after tragedy, this reminder that most hearts are good. Grandfather had left a substantial savings behind, an amount that surprised me, given his simple way of life. So I did not fear poverty. What I feared was loneliness, and in spite of the islanders' best efforts, my loneliness was overwhelming. Though not social by any means, I did enjoy the comfort of family. Grandfather had been my family, and I missed the quiet routine of our life. A pot of coffee shared on the front steps in summer, or near the wood stove in winter. The steady rhythm of 2 carving knives, the good smell of stew. As a young boy, I had been lonely, isolated. I was too young then to appreciate the friend my grandfather might be. But growing up and caring for birds, learning to carve, sharing the work around the cottage, I had truly learned to love my grandfather as a friend. I had nearly forgotten what loneliness felt like. With grandfather gone, I seemed unable to accomplish anything. When we released the cormorant on the day he died, there had been no birds left to tend, and since then I had found no new birds. In fact, I had not been to the shore at all. I stayed inside the house. Sometimes I just sat for hours, or I slept. I slept quite a bit. This went on for nearly 3 months, and although my refrigerator was well stocked with frozen casseroles, I lost weight. I felt so weak, so tired. Then one night I became very ill. I lay in bed, my body burning with fever, my head spinning, my fingers numb. I rushed and vomited and coughed until tears came. I had never been so sick, and because I was so sick and weak, and without anyone, all my emotions overcame me, and I found myself sobbing. Trembling with my hand on the key around my neck, I stared up at the beam where Anna had carved her name, and I whispered, "Anna, please help me." I cried for a time, then finally fell into sleep. I slept for 18 hours and did not wake until supper time the next day. But when I woke, I felt fine. All traces of illness were gone, and I was clear-headed and ravishingly hungry. I put together a huge meal for myself, a smorgasbord from all the latest kindness in my refrigerator, and I ate and ate and ate. Then, when I was finished, I felt an urge to do something I hadn't done in a while. I wanted to walk ashore. Already it was nightfall, but the moon was full and there was enough light for me to find my way among the rocks and grasses. I breathed deeply the fresh air, the sense of seaweed and shells. I believe I loved the ocean more that night than any other night of my life. I was moving along, watching the waves and the moon and the stars coming out in the sky one by one. Then something else happened that had not occurred in a while. The key around my neck began to vibrate. I placed my hand over it, then stopped and listened. The surf was so loud that it was difficult to hear much else. But I did hear something, a cry of some sort, and scraping. I followed the direction of the sound, and about 20 feet away, wedged between 2 large pieces of driftwood, I discovered a wooden box. Inside it, something was definitely alive. The key pulsed strongly now, warming my chest as I moved my hands over the box. The crying inside had stopped, but the scraping noise continued. I tried to lift the hinged lid, but it wouldn't move. There was a lock holding it shut. I pulled and pulled at this lock, trying to force it open with my hands, but it was too sturdy. And a thought came to me. For the first time since I hung it around my neck 7 years before, I removed the mermaid's key. I put it into the lock, and then the lock opened. Carefully, I lifted up the lid only an inch or so. I was worried what might fly out at me. But I didn't worry long, for a small, smooth tongue licked the tips of my fingers, and a cold, wet nose nudged the palm of my hand. In the box was a puppy, and he became my family. Chapter 12. My dog's name is Poseidon, after the god of the sea. He's large now and brown with floppy ears and big paws, and a nose for puffins. Yes, puffins. And gulls and ucklets and mirrors. Poseidon finds injured seabirds long before I do, long before the key vibrates. In fact, since he's finding them first, the key has stopped moving altogether. It seems to know that its work is done. I have had Poseidon for 3 years. I brought him home that first night after rescuing him from a box. He crawled into bed with me and laid his head beside my feet and snored like a chainsaw. We still sleep this way. He loves to play as much now, and when he was a puppy, he especially loves to retrieve, and I can throw anything anywhere, and he will find it. And he loves the birds in the same way I do. When we carry home a gull with a broken wing, Poseidon will walk close beside me, sniffing the bird, his eyes full of concern. And while I am sending the bird's wing or dressing a wound, Poseidon will lick the bird's face. The birds have never minded. Poseidon travels with me on the ferry when I take my carvings to the mainland. He's a great friend of the ferry captain, who has taken to keeping a tin of biscuits in his cabin just for Poseidon. I'm proud to have continued my grandfather's tradition with my carvings, though I will likely never be the craftsman he was. Still, I will keep trying. Mrs. Maxwell is still alive and in remarkably good health for someone who's 93 years old. Poseidon and I stop and see her when we are nearby, and I bring her tea and chocolates, which she likes very much. Mrs. Maxwell has become a sort of aunt to me. In addition to carving and keeping birds and playing with Poseidon, I've taken up one more activity. I've joined the church choir. I have no voice and can barely carry a tune, and at times I feel a little more than silly in those long robes. But this is the only way I can see Franny, who sings in the choir as well. Franny is only 15, so I feel it wouldn't be proper to court her just yet. I am patient to wait a few more years, provided no one else tries to marry her. She's a lovely girl with large brown eyes and a beautiful singing voice, and I know there will be plenty of boys who will want her for their own. But I have one advantage over all of them. I once saved her life. Yes, Franny is or was the small girl Grandfather and I found in the cold woods that night 10 years ago. And one day I hope to marry her. She seems to like me very much, so I think I have a chance. One evening last week, after choir practice, Franny and I took a walk with Poseidon along the shore. The sun was setting, spreading orange and silver over the dark green water. The island was beautiful. Franny and I had talked and talked about our hopes, our secret wishes, those things we wanted to be and do in our lives. Franny hopes to be a painter. As we talked, the breeze blew Franny's long hair softly against her face, and I could hardly stop looking at her. Poseidon wanted to retrieve, so she threw a bit of driftwood for him again and again, laughing at his funny ways. It was a remarkable evening. After I walked Franny home, I biked with Poseidon beside me back to our little cottage, and I felt so happy, so filled with good hope. I'd finally let go the desire I'd had as a boy to see the larger world, and I knew I would be content to be an islander for the rest of my life. I had found in Poseidon and Mrs. Maxwell, and now in Franny, what I had longed for since my grandfather's death. A family. And I had found them because of the mermaid. Though I know her name, I also know that I will never understand the mystery of her. I cannot begin to guess whether our spirits might dwell once we have left this sweet earth, nor why she came to me in the grasses that night and spoke my name. I do know that I once believed heaven was only clouds and sky, but now I wonder if it might be as well the dark and mysterious sea. That same night that I walked with Franny on the beach, I returned again very late to the shore. Poseidon and I left the cottage around midnight, and with a flashlight I made my way to the sea grasses where the mermaid had once found me. I sat there peacefully and looked out across the waters, stroking the head of my beloved dog. I thought about my parents holding hands. I thought about my grandfather carving a small new planet for the world. And I thought about a girl and her dog, swimming together forever in that deep blue sea. Before I left, I stood on a rock and tossed a bottle as far into the water as it would go, letting the tide carry it away. In the bottle was a letter, and it read, "Dear Anna, thank you, Daniel." And with that concludes The Islander by Cynthia Rylant. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment.